starting. Give me a sec.
Ik zie de volgende slide niet.
Yes.
Dankjewel.
Yes.
Ik ga ook kijken. Ik ken het al Hi everyone. I'm Serkan Yildiz. I'm a consultant at PH Pro and I work mainly with Symfony. Today I will explain some cool features that are introduced with Symfony 4.3 and some deprecations. Yeah, that's it. Living on the Edge, the name comes from the Symfony.com website itself. Symfony introduces some cool features under that name. There are 47 articles published. There are many more improvements, bug fixes, etc. But you can find a whole list on Living on the Edge, herokuapp.com. Yep. And I've selected some cool features to explain. There are 3 new components added with Symfony 4.3. The first one is the mailer component. Email standards are hard, etc., but Symfony makes it easy to create mails and attach files. It looks like this. It has a fluent interface, and people who worked with SwiftMailer are familiar with this syntax. And it's also easy to attach files, like by using the attach from path method. You can attach files that are publicly accessible, but if you want to attach files that are not publicly accessible, then you can use the file handler and it will attach that file. The second and the third arguments are optional. That's it. It has a native integration with Twig, so you don't have to put your email content in your code, and it's fully separately. And by using the context method, you can assign variables that you want to use in your email template. Responsive emails are hard, especially people who work with emails know this. But Symfony comes with a solution. It has a native integration with Inky. The new name is Zerp. I don't know if someone knows that, but it provides a Bootstrap-like syntax to create responsive emails. And the only thing you have to do is install it. And it works out of the box. Next one, there is support for inline CSS. I know that it was already possible to do it, but it wasn't in Twig. But yeah, and styling in emails are also hard. Fun fact with inline CSS is that the underlying library is developed by a Belgian developer, Thijs Verkooyen. So thanks to him. There is also not native, there is support for Markdown too. And you can actually combine all those cool features at once by piping the Twig filters. The second new component is a mailer component. The MIME component creates those messages, but the mailer component provides transports to actually be able to send them. There is built-in support for SMTP, but also support for Amazon, Gmail, MailChimp, Mailgun, Postmark, and SendGrid. The only thing you have to do is enable it, and that's it. There are also 2 cool transports too. The first one is the failover, and that means that it will try to send it in the first instance by using Postmark, and if it fails, then it will try to send it with SendGrid. And round robin will act like a load balancer, and it will first select the first and then the second. And the cool thing is that you can combine more than 2 transports. Sending emails is hard, and it's network. It is using network, so it is difficult. And if you want to send multiple emails, then it's really slow. But by putting those 4 lines in your configuration, you're able to send emails asynchronously, and it's using the messenger bus. The third new component is HttpClient, which is a replacement for Guzzle, but it's better than Guzzle because you can send natively asynchronous requests, and it works with curl. And if you don't have curl on your machine, it will do it with the stream wrappers. Yeah, the basic usage is like this. And the cool thing, by creating a HttpClient, it will first check if you have curl installed, and if it is, then it will return a curl HttpClient, and if it's not, then native HttpClient. The cool thing with HttpClient is this line is non-blocking. So what does that mean? When you create a request, it's just created, and that's it. The request has not been made yet. And then you're interested in the status code, so you ask for the status code. At that point, the request will be made. And as soon as the request gets the status code, it will return and continue with the next line. It will not wait for the full response. And then you are interested, for example, in the headers. Then it will fetch until it gets the headers, and then actually return and go to the next statement. When you fetch the content, you can fetch like by using getContent, and if the response type is application JSON, then you're able to use the toArray method, which does basically a JSON decode of the response. The cool thing, also, the second cool thing with the HttpClient is that you can stream responses instead of, for example, if you want to download an Ubuntu release, yeah, you will likely end with memory issues because PHP is known for that. Sorry. Responses are lazy, like I mentioned in the previous slide. You can directly check on the status code, and if it fails, yeah, you will throw an exception. When it succeeds, you can stream the response. And it's just easy like that. There are tons of improvements. I couldn't put a number on it. I've selected a few of them which were interesting to me. There is support for hyperlinks, which is a cool feature. If your console application does not support it, then it will use the link as a fallback. The messenger component was added with an experimental tag with Symfony 4.1. In Symfony 4.2, the experimental tag got removed. And with Symfony 4.3, there is now a possibility to retry messages if they fail. By default, it will try 3 times. And if it keeps failing, then it will discard it or transport to another transport, which can be, for example, a doctrine database. It looks like this. The max retries is configurable, and there is a delay, so it will not directly retry it, but you can put a delay between each trial. It works like, first, if it will try to execute it, it fails, then it will wait for 1 second, and if it fails again, then it will be multiplied by 2 and 4, and so on. This is also a cool one. It's a simple improvement, but it was a cool one. Here's a basic route definition, and we have provided a default value of 1 to the route. But when you generate the route, then you will end likely with 2 different URLs which have the same content. And I think Google doesn't like that. But there is a small improvement. By putting an exclamation mark before the parameter, Symfony will always include the default value when you generate a URL. This is also a cool improvement. Previously, the BIC or BIC constraint would validate separately as the IBAN, but now by providing the IBAN property path, it will validate if the IBAN and the BIC you provide belong to the same country. It was always possible to deprecate services, but now it's also possible to deprecate service aliases, which is a good improvement. With Symfony, the dependency injection component, there were 3 ways to inject services into services. The first one is a setter injection, then you have a property injection, and the constructor injection, which is the preferred way. But the bad thing with setter injection is that you do not have control over if the dependency got changed during the lifecycle of the object. But with the with injection, it will inject the optional service and then return a clone of it. So you are basically creating immutable services. Yeah, it looks like this in the service container definition. The only difference between the setter injection and the with injection is by providing a third argument, which is true. But the most interesting thing with this way of injecting is that you can auto-wire this. And the only thing you have to specify is this dot block. And Symfony will recognize it and inject it automatically. Yeah, this is another cool improvement in the dependency injection component. There is a URL environment variable processor. So URL environment processors are basically processors that will process those things. When you need to connect to a database in your application, but to also need the database name somewhere else in your configuration, then you have to duplicate that information or have multiple environment variables like the host, the support, the username, etc. And that was not the best way to work with it. By using the URL environment processor, you can fetch some pieces of that connection string to use somewhere else in your configuration. Yeah, the event dispatcher changed also. In previous versions, the first argument was the event name and the second was the event itself. But with Symfony 4.3, the first argument became the event itself, and the second argument is now the event name, which is optional because the new best practice in Symfony 4.3 is to use a fully qualified class name as the event name. One side note maybe is that the event dispatcher interface moved to the Symfony contracts namespace and the event class itself too, and that's it. There are 8 new validation constraints. The ones at the left side are mostly synthetic sugars because there are other ways to write constraints like greater than or equals, and less than or equals, etc. But on the right side, those are interesting to me. Unique will validate that our elements and array are unique. JSON will check that the provided value is a JSON value, and time zone, there you can specify that a given time zone belongs, for example, to a continent. For example, if you want to only have time zones from Asia. The last one is an interesting one because I think a couple of meetups ago there was a talk about have I been pwned, etc. And Symfony comes with a solution for compromised passwords. By applying this validation constraint, you ensure that the password given by a user has not been leaked. Or if it has leaked, you can configure it to check how many times it got leaked. Yeah, that's an interesting one to secure our applications. There are new test assertions, or actually aliases for previous test assertions. To give an example, you could validate the status code by using the assert chain, but there are a couple of new test assertions that you can use, like assert response status code, say. You can use Rector PHP because it has some refactoring things to replace those old test assertions to use the new ones automatically. But yeah, I will not explain all the test assertions. I've put here the link. I will share most likely the slides so you can go check it out. There are 2 new password encoders in Symfony with 4.3. bcrypt and argon2i got deprecated, and the replacements are Sodium or Auto. And I think Auto is the new best practice to use. Auto has a fallback system. It will first check if you have Sodium installed on your system, then it will use that. If you have then Argon, if you don't have Sodium, then it will check if it has Argon2i. And if you don't have it, then it will use the default password hashing algorithm. Yeah, Symfony 5.0 will be released at the end of this year. I'm excited for it because I saw a couple of pull requests that are interesting, like secret management, and that it has automatically support for HashiCorp, Vault, etc. And also the security component will get some love. That's it. I want to thank the Symfony community because the only thing that I have done is composing some code examples from the Symfony.com website. So yeah, thanks to the Symfony community. That's it. Are there any questions? Yes?
Yeah, the inline CSS component, how does it work exactly? Because it contains style tag and
yes. By applying that filter, it will use the library written by Thijs Verkooyen. And yeah, I didn't check exactly how it works internally, but it uses that library to inline the CSS elements. That's those styles inline to the elements.
I have a question. They're introducing a new HTTP client. Is
Yes.
that going to be PSR compatible at all, considering what Potencia said about Symfony and PSRs?
Yes. It is not PSR 18 compatible, but there's an adapter that you can use, which is the PSR 18 client, if you want to be compliant with the PSR. Okay. Any other questions? No. Thank you for your.
Thank you, Stefan. So now we're going to take like 15 minutes break. So at 9 o'clock we will come back for our final lightning talk.